And I hope that this event, for some of you who I think who've been on this all morning, a few of you, some of you are just dropping in right now. We hope that this adds to that. And why we wanted to do a roundtable was really just to kind of bring up some of the key points in our industry, have a discussion around what we could be doing, what others are doing, and just to talk about state of the industry, pretty much. So I'm so happy to have all of you on. Gary, Larry, looks like we got quite a few of the user advisory board on here. So I'll do my best to go through and do some quick introductions. Ben Brower from Stillwater Custom Cabinets in Michigan is on, and he is primarily doing high-end residential. We've got Jacob Edmond from USA Millwork. There he is. He's the head of our advisory board and mostly doing architectural millwork engineering. We've got Rod Host. Rod comes to us from Minnesota at Felling Products. Wave your hand, Rod. Yeah, always on the new library.
Try
we got Bruce Humphrey at Caseworks down in Southern Cal. Bruce has been a big influencer for us here, and we thank him for that. And interesting to get his perspective on the way things are here. Larry, longtime client, Aristocratic Cabinets from Washington. Still doing a lot of work in Hawaii, I hope, Larry.
Yeah, mostly Hawaii and Northern California.
There you go. Good deal. Gary Balcom, previous user board president in Atlanta area, Georgia, Atlanta Cabinet Shop. Thanks, Gary, for being on. Appreciate it very much.
No problem.
Yeah, good deal. So really, we have some questions. A lot of these guys have had the privy to them, and I'd like to start it off with, let's start at the beginning. So if you could create a standard drafting process within your company, what would that look like, and why? And I'm going to start with Jacob Edmond with that particular question. If you're going to standardize that, what would that look like to you?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's very, applicable right now. That is one of my big tasks here with USA Millwork is we've got engineers and drafters across multiple locations in multiple states. And so we have taken the approach of looking at it much like an assembly line, just like you would manufacturing. And so as you scale anything, everything we do can be done perhaps by one person, but how do we break it down and be able to scale that? And so that means breaking down the tasks so that we can have multiple people do that. So as we look at drafting as a piece, a lot of times in our industry, there's kind of two trains of thought is, okay, do you have the same engineer take the project from kind of cradle to the grave? So if they take it from estimating and they draft it and engineer, but when you're dealing with two multi-million-dollar projects, there's no way for one engineer to do that in the timeframes that we're asked to. So building a standard that caters to both schedule and quality and the standards that we have to deal with additionally. So here in the States, we've got WI, we've got AWI, there's seismic depending on where you're at, and as well as along the different product mixes we do, countertops, stone, epoxy, metal casework, things like that. So there's a lot to expect every engineer to be able to know how to do. So we, when it comes to Microvellum, try to build our library to incorporate as much of that as possible. So the goal is that we build our library to where they answer the fewest questions possible in the wizard, and as many of our things that we can standardize that are always the same behind the scenes, so to speak, can stay that way. So what I mean by that is like drawer box construction, dowel placement, things that we can say, this is always a constant, or if you answer this question this way, these things will be answered for you. And so that's the biggest reason we want our drafters using Microvellum to draft. And it's not just for that to be able to go into production, but it's also so that the drawings themselves, the 2D drawings and the construction standards and things like that are a part of it. So additionally, things like, is it a custom or a premium AWI job? Well, there's some things that when you say premium come into play, and we don't necessarily want every one of our drafters to have to memorize that and potentially answer or miss one of those features. So we are building a process to where we have one library across our 5 locations. So a little bit of context, USA Millwork has 5 manufacturing facilities that used to be their own individual millwork companies. Each were using Microvellum before USA Millwork. And so now we have one library that we can use to draft and produce at all facilities. And the reason we do that is so that we can sell a job, draft a job, manufacture it anywhere, and we don't have to know that at the time of drafting. All that matters is it a custom or premium AWI job? Is it PLAM or is it wood case work? So trying to break down, just like you do in estimating, you know, you're basically filling out your spec group as you're selling a job. Is it PLAM? Are the interiors melamine? Are they PLAM? Is it a veneer job? Is it a face frame job? You know, break it down into certain questions that then we build that into our wizard, and that wizard builds out your spec group and your construction for the drafter from there. And then even if things change later, making it to where those changes can be put in. So things like the valance needs to be added on all upper cabinets. That should be an easy change. And so we can make that at the spec group level, redraw our products because our sections are all pulled from Microvellum. It updates everything all together.
Before we get too far on that, I want to touch on something that you said. You mentioned the idea of an assembly line, and so how did USA Millwork engineer that or stumble into that? How did that term assembly line happen? What were the things that led you to believe that was the right way to go?
So there's a couple things. I mean, that's a bit of the natural evolution, but more applicable to us. You know, there's just a lot of common problems that happen when we didn't take that approach. So one, you know, when you've got a single engineer assigned to a job, right? And there's a lot of knowledge that goes with a project that if not documented or you don't have a process for that to be stored, it lives in that person's head. So we never wanted to be captive to any person saying falling out sick or not showing up for work one day or having to jump onto a more pressing job. And that was constantly recurring for us. Okay, so Tony's out this week. We got to shift this whole job. It's got to keep going while he's gone, but there's all this information. I don't know how he set up his spec groups. I don't know how he set up these custom products. I don't know how far he got on X, Y, or Z. So we knew that we needed to have a next man up mentality. Same thing is true in the shop. If your saw operator goes down, next man on the saw, he picks up where that guy left off. He knows what programs have been cut. We have a process and a flow for that. We needed that same mentality in drafting and engineering. And it was that much more important at the scale that we're at that we could not afford to be able to just tell a client, I'm sorry, your drawings have to wait a week until Tony gets back. That's just not acceptable. So we set about the path of, okay, how do we make that a reality of we are never captive to any certain individual having to be gone.
So that's really good. So it's key, kind of that single source. You didn't want to be captive. That makes so much sense. And besides the risk the loss of risk there of somebody not being able to do that because they're sick or they, like you said, priorities. Have there been benefits that you've seen by doing the assembly approach?
Yeah, so what you'll find, one of the first things we did building towards this was doing team drafts. So if you say, I have $1 million job and this is, 500 drafting hours, you put one resource on it, you're captive to how many 40-hour weeks it stack up to get to 500 hours, right? If I can throw 3 guys on that, I can, obviously get there faster. But additionally, we started realizing, okay, when we've got 3 people working on something, they're collaborating and overlapping each other and saying, oh, I didn't realize you did this way. I've been doing it this other way. So naturally, by having that communication, each of them started learning things maybe they didn't know. Oh yeah, I didn't realize that was an ADA standard. Now I know, and now I know where to go for it. But also we started highlighting flaws in our process that multiple people had different understandings of maybe what was tribal knowledge. On top of that, there was always the complaint from manufacturing or install. Like people would say, I want stuff that comes from this drafter because I know what to expect, or he knows how to interpret my field dimensions. It forced us to answer those questions and standardize the process so that there was never any of like, oh, I can tell who drew this because this was done this way. We want it to be uniform no matter where it comes from. And so it started to force us to address those differences in training and in standards.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And do you think that process helped the individual user in their career development and their influencing growth at USA Millwork? And how?
Yeah, I mean, that's another big goal for us. In general, what I've found in this industry is there's not a whole, like, the career path is somebody works in the shop and eventually they move into the office. Their first path in the office is I'll be an engineer, or maybe I'm an installer and I'll be a PM or something. We want to give people career paths and options. And I don't want my engineers thinking that their only way to get a raise or a promotion is to go be a project manager or to go be, manager. Like there's a career path just in engineering. Additionally, we need to be breeding our talent. So not just having to go and poach, a great engineer from another company. We want to develop the next generation of talent. And that means giving a path for somebody to come into engineering at an entry level. And we have tasks and a role for them that they can do that don't mean you have to be able to do everything that every engineer does from the start. So breaking it down into assembly line also allows us to create roles within engineering as a function, as a business function, that say, okay, we have a role called a support engineer. You can come in here and you can work under an engineer 2 or an engineer 3, and you can learn from them by doing tasks under their guidance and leadership that maybe don't require us to put a whole project on your shoulders from day one.
That's great. That's really great. So I wanted to just spend a few minutes and open up to others who have comments in the room here. Clay, do we have them raise their hand? Is that what you recommend?
They should be able to unmute themselves. So
okay.
You can click on the mic and then just unmute yourself.
Just go ahead and unmute yourself and speak up. We'll just give it a minute here and we'll see how this goes. So what questions do you have for Jacob or any of the other people on this call about how the standardization of drafting processes and engineering processes can help your business? Maybe you're struggling with that right now.
How much time did it take you to implement, and how many designers or drafters were involved?
So for us specifically, we're still implementing, we're still going through transition. So I don't want to give the illusion that this is all complete, we've got it all figured out. Here at USA Millwork, I've been working, on this specifically for right up, it'll be 2 years next month. And so it's taken that long to build the library that we have today, which for the first time now, probably this month, I can say that we can take a project from any shop to another shop. Now that's not without pain points. There's still differences and answers questions that have to be answered, but it's a conceivable reality at this point, and we have done that. Two, we published in July internally our first drafting standards, which took, I would say, 2 to 3 months, where we put a committee together to develop that as a single set of documents that, we had a committee and a steering committee and had drafts and iterations. So, I think that for every company, it's a little bit of a different path and maybe even a little bit of a different North Star for you. But standardization and just continual improvement is, especially for us as engineers, that's why we're here. That's why any of us are on this call interested in Microvellum, is how can we make our jobs easier and make manufacturing go smoother.
Yep. Bruce has a question, I think.
I was just going to add on to what Jacob was talking about. What we have done is we went to an online checklist system. So basically, like what you were talking about, having your drafting standards, we kind of grew it in place. And as we encountered things that were broken, we would write it into our checklist. So we have a standardized way of moving through every project. Sometimes it feels very, I don't know if pedantic is the right word, but where you're looking at steps that don't apply to this job. But I can tell you more times what happens is when you go back, you may even go back and you go, okay, I need to do that step or whatever, and you realize, I didn't do something right. We have one step that says go check. We do some nesting, but we do a lot of part-based machining. So one of our steps is to go back and look at the G code. And you know what? Sometimes we'll see a red, a part in there that something didn't go quite right on. And if we hadn't caught it in engineering, of course it will get caught out in production, and it takes 5 times, 10 times longer to deal with. And oftentimes they don't catch it until the 25th part. So and the other thing I'll add on to that is that we have gone to the practice of, we have one global file, and that is what we use on every job. And if someone has to add some hardware that needs a lookup table, we put it in the master template. And then if you need that, or everybody just refreshes their project with that. So it keeps that standardization in there. And then we just do everything customizing wise through Wizards. So I would say we've gone through and made 50% of the global variables look at the wizard to see if it has an overriding value, and if it does, then use that and so forth. So it's been a nice step in just kind of making sure everything kind of goes the same way every time.
And something huge there, I want to make sure that kind of drive home is, write it down. Whatever your standard is, write it down and have it somewhere that everybody has access to. And 2, a lot of people don't do that because they feel like they have to have all the answers before they can document something. You're not going to have your standard complete. Don't let that stop you from creating it and issuing it and evolving it. What that does is, 1, having it in writing, you think, oh, everybody knows this. You're hiring new people, or you can't assume. This puts it out in front of everybody that I know we all are operating from the same set of rule books. And 2, what happens then is, then when an issue arises, the first thing you do is go back, okay, did you follow the checklist? Nope, you skipped step 10. There's your issue. The process isn't broken. Somebody just didn't follow the process. And so, or maybe it's a new problem and you say, none of these checklists would have gotten it. Now let's add that as a new checklist item. So like I said, I think that a lot of people get scared to start writing down and documenting an SOP or a process because they feel like, I don't have time to get the whole thing written out and we're going to miss something. You got to start. You got to get it out there.
And with something so open like Microvellum, even down to the way that files are created, what the naming structure is, how do you name all your materials, all of that stuff written down, like you said. And it's amazing how it flows a lot better. Because the next one in line, you said, your assembly line. For us, after engineering, the next one is purchasing. And to get all of their stuff in the same format every time, always complete, it's a big difference.
I'd like to shift gears a little bit, still on drafting and engineering, but how do you balance speed of drawing and accuracy versus speed to deliver?
I'll see if I understand what your question is. So we use a balance of just entering stuff through product list, and then we use toolbox. So in other words, okay, so we have nested based processing, we have part based processing, and we try to use what makes sense for at the time. So or for the situation. So when it's something that we need to get a visual feedback on, we will use toolbox. We will make sure every little thing interacts with every part interacts with each other. We will make sure that locks are in the right, everything is dialed in. But then if we are sure that it's correct, then we will start using product list after that, which is a much faster input and processing if you don't need to have that visual feedback. Now, if you're drawing everything, if you need to do shop drawings, then of course that's a different deal, but we don't have to. And Ben, I know, has to draw pretty much everything, but he's got an interesting take on this, so I'll let him give you his perspective.
Yeah, like Bruce said, we have to draw everything very highly custom. We never build basically the same cabinet twice. Some version of wood species or door profile or finish or size or shape, something's different about every cabinet. So everything we're doing is getting 3D graphics, so that we are checking, machining as well as actually presenting those drawings to the client. So we also have rebuilt every single report and come up with new reports and ways to display the data specifically in certain locations where we need it. And that, I think, is probably one of the most underutilized parts of Microvellum, is the specificity that you can have with the reporting. And so, if you're boring doors, all our doors are bored offline because they're hardwood doors. They're not coming from the CNC like many of the guys. So I want to know what my tab distance is from the edge of the door. I want to know the distance from the bottom to the center of all of those things and tied into a specific subassembly name for a product. But that's all I want to know at the door boring. I don't want that inside of every other piece of information about that product. So we have a report that is just hinge locations. That's it. And then you turn that, and this is all digital and built into, screens in the shop. But once you're done with that phase, when you go to the next process, it's a totally different report with the data that's specific to that location.
So Bruce, you mentioned you have the ability to just go right into the product list and avoid the drawing. How did you get confident that was going to be, that you could do that? What steps did you take to get there? So you didn't have to draw.
If we draw a certain kind of cabinet, we draw it, and it has a lock in it, and maybe it's a lock that we haven't used before. We go in and we look at where the cam hits, where it's hitting the strike. We just want to make sure everything's working right, and then when you use that same cabinet in another room or in a copy of, let's say it's a condo, and you got another type E1, on the next floor up, I don't have to draw that again because, that all of the parameters work. So that's why we trust it. We know that no matter what size that cabinet is, width, height, or depth, that lock is still going to work. And so then we can just, I'm going to say, enter blindly, but not blindly in the way that we don't know where we're going. It's blindly because we trust that we've already looked at it and we don't have to look at it again in that detail. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So basically, to sum it up, you trust your data.
Because it's tested.
Because it's tested. That's right.
because it,
At
We
some
don't-
point along the way, you've drawn every one of those products. You don't have to draw them again, as far as.
and I tell my guys, don't trust anything. I am one of the most cynical persons on the planet when it comes to engineering and all of this stuff, because if you make any assumption, it seems like you're always wrong. So yeah, we test everything, and then once we test it and it's proven, we trust it.
So after it's trusted, where do you put it, in a separate library or in a separate file, or where do you put those products?
They're just stored in that project, because the next project, very good chance we won't have that same product again. Because it's
Oh,
very
okay.
custom to
Got
each
it.
job. Yep. So we just try to build enough prompts in there. We build the prompts in when we know that type of situation is going to come in on the next project. If not, we just modify that cabinet for that project only. And that happens a lot.
Got it.
So kind of shifting gears again, what going to open this up a little bit more to the group, and I'll tap on some of the other board members that haven't spoken yet, maybe Larry, Gary, Rod, a bit more, but just for everybody thinking about this, when did you realize that technology was really going to be the key to your future? And so this industry tends to be thinking of themselves as woodworkers, but there's a transformation that we see happen in industry and with our clients, that they begin to become technologists and not just woodworkers. And so what were the events, Rod or Gary or Larry, that kind of led you to that point in your career?
For me, I think it was when I first bought Cybex, which was a cut listing software on an Apple IIe with a light pen, and then bought our first CNC machinery. That opened a big door for me.
So do you when was that? What year was that?
Oh, that had to be in about 1978.
Okay. And that opened up what? What did that, you said it kind of opened up a whole new world for you. What did that do?
Well, it just let me know what you could do with computers and programming. And, it's a lot different than using a story pole. Probably a little bit old school for you guys, some of you guys, but we used to use story poles. So that's where you mark a stick with pencil lines and then cut your cabinets by hand on a table saw.
Story pole product's a good microphone product to have as well.
And what are you doing today, Larry, that is so much different between 1978 when you got your first CNC and 2020?
Well, I think we're always fighting the same battles. They just get more complicated.
How about you, Rod? What do you think? What were those moments that you realized that you weren't just going to be a woodworker anymore?
I would have to say, well, I started out in the shop. I worked out in the shop for 10 years and was installing building, and then they needed a programmer at that time. And so I did that for, 10 years essentially before we started Microvellum, and the equipment was falling apart, I guess. And so we fixed the equipment that we have, but then the software was no longer compatible with, so it just forced us into a new machine, essentially, is what happened. And that's when we made the transition to Microvellum, and no going back. It's the hardest part is just trying to get all your employees to get on the same page and agree that change is good.
And how did you do that? What were some of the things that kind of put them in, it's definitely the employees, right? This is an industry of talent, of all kinds of different talent, whether it be, in the shop or behind the keyboard. or estimating of some sort, selling, what do you do? What have you done to help those employees get it?
Well, essentially, it's all the other things that they don't have to do anymore that they always had to do. I mean, they don't have to locate the screws or whatever for all your hole pops for your doors and all that and your drawer holes. We were doing all that manually because we didn't have the software that did it for us. And then the biggest turn is we went to a nested base machine, which we had a pod and rail before, or the nested base machine, and we machine on both sides. We have operators that it's not easy to flip those sheets, but they do it, and they don't complain, I guess. So in the long run, they realize how much easier it is than what it was. And that's the big turnaround, and to try to convince them that, yeah, would you want to go back the old way? And they're like, heck no.
Yeah, that's interesting. Before you told them what it was going to be like and they experience it and they can look back and go, oh, yeah, I see. But were they afraid they were going to lose their jobs or part of their jobs because of that?
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say I would say that that opens up them the opportunity to try to do more and voice their opinions on what we can do up in the office to help them out more. They see what the software is capable of doing and the reports that are available, and they point that out that, hey, can you do this? So you rack your brain a little bit, and I think so. Yeah, we can do that. And just makes them think a little bit more instead of making it just a big puzzle for them to put together out there. They are putting their heads towards what we can do to pull together as a company, I guess.
It kind of sounds a little bit like you're serving them in a way, right? You realize who's making the product physically, but up front in the engineering office, all that work that's happening up front, you're delivering to them in a way that they can consume the best, most efficiently. You're actually serving them. That's
absolutely. Until I make a mistake, then it's all at me.
And it's your fault. Yeah.
I think one of the disadvantages of the technology is it causes employees to get overly dependent on it and kind of stupid. Yep. No offense, in that I'll have an employee drop a filler on the floor and need to replace it. They'll walk over to the beam saw operator and ask him to cut it for them. And I'm going, can you just go over to the cable saw and cut this? Because they're so used to having everything fed to them that they're lost without it.
Yeah.
Funny you mentioned story poles, Larry. And the first shop I worked in was a residential door and window shop. We built hurricane rated, and when I got there, no machinery, no anything. I was doing shop drawings for them, and they would make the story poles that show where the header was, the transom, every little piece of molding. And I remember the first time looking at it and saying, I've got all that drawn in the shop in AutoCAD. Like, I can just plot that out for you. You guys don't have to redraw that by hand on a piece of plywood. And they were like, yeah, well, I'm sure it's wrong. So I did it. I plotted it out full size, and pretty soon they were coming to me asking for that. And that, I was going to say to your answer, when did you realize technology was kind of changing your career path? I was going to say the first time I saw a guy cut his finger off in the shop, I knew I didn't know. Right. But bigger than that, I think, was that first shop I worked in, and realizing that grew to where we were doing radius and ellipses, and they were swinging routers. And I said, I can cut this all for you. I can send my CAD files to a CNC guy, and they can make jigs for you guys. You guys don't have to spend all this time. So realizing that there's power in that, like, we were doing rework, and pretty soon when you're able to flip that dynamic of resistance initially of like, oh no, that's something that I add value to this company by doing that task, and you flip it into realizing there's possibilities there, and then the shop guys are coming to you and saying, oh, well, since you were able to do that, what if you could do this? This has always been a pain point for me. And suddenly they're asking you, coming to you with ideas and helping problem solve, and really growing ultimately what is possible for your company.
That's cool. Yeah. So Gary, kind of, again, I'm going to switch subjects. Actually, does anybody have any questions before I do that? Any other questions? Go ahead and open your mic.
Yep, there was a question from Dakota Lynn. It's on the topic of drafting. I don't know if anybody saw that there in the chat. It's talking about how many projects can a drafter be expected to handle at once?
All right, who wants to take that?
One.
Go one.
Can't draw on 2 jobs at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit more of a loaded question.
Yeah.
But, it depends on your company size and a lot of things. But, my goal is always to allow my drafters and engineers to focus on the task at hand and then give them, just like a shop guy, he can only cut one piece of wood at a time. He's got a pile behind him. You always keep work in front of them to do. They know what's coming next, but you want them to be able to focus on the task at hand. And for a drafter, if they're having to think about something else, the next project, or jump from one thing to the other, they're not really doing either of them very well.
Good question. Thanks for that. Thanks, Clay. Yeah, good answer. 1. The loneliest number, but it's a good number. Gary, so
Yes, sir.
finding talent is difficult in our industry. And how has the education system helped or not helped, supported you?
Oof. I'm probably the worst person to ask this question to. Honestly, I'm the only drafter here. I would love to find a young apprentice to grow up and learn our trade, learn our specific standards and operating procedures, but I have not found anybody. I'm sure they're out there, but I have talked to a couple schools locally without any success. Sorry, I don't have a better answer. Throw me another one and I'll try.
No, that's a really good answer. So you've looked,
I
and
have.
is it that the young talent don't know how great this is?
You know what? I think we've hit it before, but this industry has a persona about it. People still see the antiquated 1950s machinery shops that are dusty, and they don't see what it is today. In fact, when we do get a chance to bring young people in, I love bringing them through the shop. It's very rare, but just to see that we got a relatively clean shop, we're organized, and there's a lot of technology involved in it, but.
And they're still not interested.
I haven't found the right, if they were going to transfer, they'd have to be 17, 18, before they'd be a good candidate for us.
Mm-hmm.
But,
Ben, how have you seen the education system help or hurt or not support your business?
I connected with all the local high schools that's thankfully near us. We still have trade schools.
cool.
And I've gotten a couple of really, really good candidates out of there. But, the ratio is somewhere near 100 to 1. 90 maybe, where you got to talk to a lot of people. But like Bruce said, I like to talk a lot. So, I'm all right.
You like the 100 to 1 odds there. Yeah, just keep talking.
Sometimes it's really painful, but if you know that going in, then you're not disappointed.
You got to sift through a lot of mud to find the gold.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But realistically, if I told all of you that if you had to talk to, 90 or 100 young guys, but you were going to get a rock star engineer out of it, I bet you'd all sit down and talk to 100 people, because every one of us needs one.
Yeah, I will tell you that it's a lot easier to find someone that can draft really well. In other words, draw lines on the screen. Used to be on paper. I see in our industry a trend towards the drawings making less and less and less sense. They're just pretty pictures, and yet they don't work for the shop. So at least Microvellum is in the middle of that. The more we can make our systems smart with what Microvellum gives us, the tools that it gives us, then those lines can actually mean something out in the plant. Like I said, we don't actually do a lot of drawing in-house because our customers do the drawing, and so we're more like a contract manufacturer. And so we typically we kind of refer to it as the garbage in, garbage out, because it really it doesn't make any sense. So that's what's really been difficult, is to find a draftsman, an operator of Microvellum with enough industry background to be able to know when to trust the drawing, go by what the drawing asks you to do, or when they don't know what they're asking for. So we need to either do the right thing. Sometimes we do the right thing and we don't tell them. Sometimes we do the right thing and we tell them. Sometimes we ask them. And literally, it depends on who it is, how green they are. It seems like the greener the customer, they're going to have to go ask the contractor, hey, can I do this? And if you know it's the best thing, sometimes you just go ahead and you do it. And sometimes we get caught, but most of the times it works correctly. So,
yeah. So some of the things that we have is a adopt a school program. I know all the advisory board members know about that. Actually, as late as last week, or as early as last week, we had a release from the Wood Career Alliance, WCA. They are sponsoring local companies like yourselves that are on this call to partner with a local school like Ben did with technical schools around. And Microvellum's committed to providing that software to them free of charge. So along with that, we've recently created a curriculum, and that curriculum is being used for training. And so it can be basically utilized to support your onboarding in a way that's coming soon. And but others on the call here, have you worked with local high schools, local trade colleges, or in a way that is meaningful for you? And what comments do you have for the quality of the candidates that Bruce discussed versus the quantity of people that you need to talk that Ben talked about? Who on the call would like to comment on that? Go ahead, Jacob.
Yeah, I'm not shy to talk a lot. So we partner with Pitt State. We have interns usually each summer, so we had a couple this last summer and the summer before. But additionally, like here in Atlanta, there's a school, Gwinnett Tech, and they have drafting technology and a couple other similar programs. So we've actually got one of our drafters here in the Atlanta area was a young graduate of that 2-year program for their architectural drafting. We hired her, and she's turned out to be an amazing drafter for us. No experience in the industry. She's came in 18, 19 years old while she was in the program and interned and worked part-time. So I'll say, I think that I went to school for architecture, so I'm predisposed to, thinking I can do things without having done them before. But if we're only able to backfill our engineers with people that have 10 and 20 years shop experience, this industry's doomed. And that's where I do think Microvellum really can be used. And that's why I've taken the path of, I fight with even my engineers almost daily about it, is you don't have to be able to build a box to be able to engineer a box, but somebody in your organization does. Boeing builds planes every day, and the vast majority of the hands that touch that plane don't have a clue about aeronautical technology or how the plane goes up, but they get them built. And so that's another reason why I would take the assembly line approaches. There definitely should be somebody with that knowledge reviewing those drawings. There's definitely should be somebody with experience redlining and approving and checking stuff, but you can get the vast majority of the work done with a well-built library and well-built set of standards, and allow people to learn along the way. Get those guys out on your shop floor, young men and women. Additionally, I would say you'll get some more diversity as well. Different vantage points. I understand how parts go together. 3D, working in 3D space. If you interview as many people as the Ben Browers, the Bruces, I think that they wouldn't hesitate to hire somebody that they can tell understands that, that they might not have built cabinets. I think there's a difference between that, having that kind of thought process, and I can see things in space and I can understand how components go together, but I might not have built a cabinet per se. That type of understanding can translate well, and I think as you talk to more and more people and you've been in this industry, you can see that a lot quicker.
That's great. Yeah. So this event is new for us at Microvellum. It transpired from the events of 2020, which we all know about, from all kinds of crazy things that have happened, and we've been able to innovate a lot of new things from the Microvellum Knowledge Network, which many of you experience today, which is our community that allows individuals to get access to documentation, to communicate with others in industry and other clients, and get access to help as well. To presentation like this, where we're able to do kind of our technical convention or our online here. And so there's been a lot of innovations that Microvellum have enjoyed from the struggles of 2020. So for the user board, I'd like to hear from kind of the top one or two things that your company have innovated from this year. It'd be interesting for people to hear, and encouraging, I think, that the struggles that we have, really lead us to improvements. And so opening this up to all you, Larry, Gary, Bruce, Ben, Jacob, and Rod, what innovations in 2020 have been a result of the hardships that have been put on you, looking back?
I'll make me talk again, guys.
Well, I can tell you one thing that we did. We purchased a very specific machine. It's a CNC, a vertical machine, a vertical CNC, but very single purpose, no tool changer, so very inexpensive, but we are dedicating it just to doors. We do residential, it's going to be mainly the hinge cups, but we do a lot of institutional. So we have mag catches, we have institutional hinges that get haunched. We have locks. Anyway, lots of hardware that goes on a door. And up to this point, for all of, most of our company's history, almost 28, 29 years, something like that, we've kind of relied on guys with napkins, the knowledge up in their head on how to do something. So we kind of bit the bullet. This will probably make us a little faster, but it will make us less reliant on one person in that position. And we've already seen, we've been able to put 4 or 5 people into to working on doors rather than just pretty much the 1 or 2 that were doing it before. So that's the one thing that we kind of would say bit the bullet. This is not the time to go spending money unwisely. So hopefully this ends up in the wise category. So
Good. That's a good example. And it seems
Yep.
like it's paying off already. It's great. Jacob, you were going to say something.
I'll talk. I mean, a couple of things. I think it accelerated some plans we had already. I mean, we within a week had to move all our engineers to be able to work from home. You know, obviously that was long term where we wanted to be, but out of necessity, we within a week jumped in to be able to have everybody work from home, and so that meant a lot of people working not on the server. So we built some good processes in place to support that and allow people to be able to work from local copies of our libraries. And so we built some pretty robust. Now we're well versed in transferring tables and importing and exporting projects and maintaining continuity of files and things like that and communicating really well. So I think that, you know, from that regard, it forced us to really address a lot of our differences and being able to do that. Two, you know, for us specifically, we had to transfer work. Our California facility was in the Bay Area that had a lot of the strictest, you know, restrictions early on. So they were not essential, could not work for, I think, 2 months unless it was like healthcare or housing. So it forced us to shift work around and meant really quickly we had to figure out how to get projects that weren't planned to go to this shop to that shop. And so it accelerated us figuring out our tool files, our processing stations and machining. I'd say the biggest one that, you know, may be interesting to the group here and on the topic of Microvellum is we made the decision to switch completely back to OEM. You know, so I think that obviously the economy and the cost savings that are huge for us as a company, and really forced us to evaluate and realize that we really weren't trading anything off functionality like maybe it would have been in the past with going from full AutoCAD to OEM. So I think that was a big one that we didn't plan on doing at the beginning of the year, but after COVID and really evaluating, realizing not only could we save some money, you know, long term, but we also actually could streamline our support of our users. We've got one software to support the 2 installs, one set of updates to test. You know, it just simplified a lot of things for us.
Good. How about you, Rod? What did your company do that's unique?
Well, first off, kind of like Jacob is, well, we're a small company as well, kind of like Gary is. I mean, I'm the only engineer there. We have a full-time draftsman that's in the office that just draws AutoCAD. And then we have a part-time that she does the same. I mean, just in 2D drawings. But for me, it's just like Jacob, where I'm working from home since March, I guess, and finding out that it works. I mean, it's just the life we live in right now is you make adjustments to make it work for yourself, not only to stay productive at the shop, but to utilize your issues that happen at home and whatnot. So we've branched into a lot more residential stuff that we've never done before. I mean, we'll pop in here or there, but the residential stuff is what's really carried us through the last 6 months, really, is doing a lot more of that we don't typically do. That just forces you to take what you can get.
So you guys diversified in markets.
Yeah, I mean, the plastic plexiglass shields and all that. I mean, we just jumped into different avenues that would keep us working.
Good. That's great. Ben, were you going to say something? Looks like you muted yourself.
Yeah, we did probably the most aggressive development in an online catalog. So the ability for us to actually, like Bruce was saying, have products that come out of the product list and we don't have to draw them. Having all of the processes to where somebody can log into our website with a dealer login, place an order with all of the variables of wood species and door profile and finish, drop all the products into a list, and when they confirm it, it creates the project and the room in Microvellum, selects all the spec group components, and drops all the products in the product list. So I don't have it actually in the dealer's hands yet, but first of the year, we're testing it internally. So we got a lot of attention when everybody's locked at home. It's amazing amount of focus that you can, everybody still wants to get some stuff done, but they can't get to the shop. So.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. So to sum it up, I think, we all had the workforce remote at one point or another, and we did as well. We had people innovate in production tools, market diversification, different markets and things. Online catalog, I think, would go into that. And then just overall technology adoption has gone, I think, a big leap forward for us and for all of you. So just before we wrap up the roundtable, I wanted to open it up for any questions from the group. We've got about 25 people on the call here. Does anybody have a burning question for the group that they would like to ask? All right, if something comes up, just go ahead and shoot an email or get a hold of these people. You can find them on our website. There's a link to our user influenced community, and these individuals that are on this call are there. Really appreciate Clay and Jessica for their organization of this event today through the rest of the week. Remember, we've got training every day from 7 a.m. until 1 p.m. Pacific. And then at 1 p.m., a different opportunity for you to learn. Tomorrow, there's a show and tell. I know a few of the people on this call are participating in that, and that'll be very interesting to see. We've got a deep dive into our release library, the 50.7, and then a sneak peek the following day on Thursday for our new library that's coming, new library structure that's coming that you'll want to hear about as well, and that's on Thursday. And then Friday, we have a social time, which I'm not sure what that means yet, Clay, so you'll have to get us oriented to what we're doing. We're wearing costumes since it's almost Halloween, or what's going on? I don't know what's happening there. So,
Are you drop shipping the drinks, Clay?
Virtual happy hour.
That's right. We'll figure, yeah, we'll hear from them. So anyway, Jessica, Clay, thank you so much for all your work. User board, thank you so much for your participation and taking an hour out of your day. Really appreciate it. Thank you on the call for your time. I hope this was a beneficial thing that helped equip you with more knowledge and that allow you to just a little inkling on what others are doing. So that might help you. So thank you so much. Thanks, Clay. Thanks, Jessica. Thank you all. Bye-bye.